And so when I turned right, I heard myself say, it's Jesus. And when I heard myself say, it's Jesus, it brought my eyes up off of the rocky road where I was walking. And it's Jesus. And boom, suddenly the Lord was standing there about 15 feet away from me, just, 3, 4 meters away from me. And I looked at him and I said, well, what are you doing here? Because, it's the same way that Peter up on the mountain said, hey, let's build some tents, one for Moses, one for Elijah, let's have a meeting here, let's have a camp out. Because when you, again, like I said, when you transition into the spirit realm, it's seamless. It's seamless. It seems so normal, so natural. I imagine that's the way death would come. I imagine that would be the way the rapture comes. There's just a seamless transition that happens. And at this point, I could see him and everything else around me. My eyes were opened up into both realms at the same time. It's rather like in 2 Kings 6, when Elisha and his servant are surrounded by the Syrian army. And the servant is afraid because of all the chariots and all the horses and everything that are against him. And Elisha prays and said, Lord, open up my servant's eyes. And so he did so. It says the Lord did so, and he saw the chariots of fire surrounding them. So both men saw both the natural realm and the spirit realm at the same time. That's what happens with me most often. And that's what happened at that point. And so when I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm here to meet the needs of the village. And I said, oh, it's great, Lord. I said, there people must need healed in here. So why don't you just walk around the village and I'll just follow you and I won't get in your way. I promise. I mean, I'm actually saying this. This is, I won't follow you. I won't be a bother at all. You just walk in there. Just let me observe. I'll learn so much if I could just watch you, lay hands on people and bring healing to people. And I said, how can I help? And he said, meet the needs of the village. And then like that, he was gone. And I was left standing there. I'm going like, wow. So, I'm there to hold a service in the little church. And I'm thinking about that. And I'm contemplating, what does he mean? And then suddenly he was there once again. He let it sink in. And then he appeared again. And I said, Lord, this is great. I said, I need to tell Carl and Dora that you're here. Let me get them, Lord. And just as I turned to do that, this light came out from the Lord. And it just was like just enveloped everything. And I saw Carl and Dora just disappeared behind this curtain of light. And then it was just suddenly the Lord and I in all that glory, just standing there, 15 feet from each other. And he said, I want to teach you how the Father communicates. I was like, whoa, it was so amazing that it seemed just normal. You're not overwhelmed thinking, oh, wow, this is so cool. I got to write it down. It's just, okay, this is normal. This is normal. It just seems completely normal. Like a friend might come up and say, hey, let's talk about last night's ball game. I mean, it just seems so normal. I was overwhelmed by his presence. Once I was in the spirit completely, once the natural world disappeared. I use the phrase in the spirit because that's what the Apostle John used in the Revelation in chapter 1 and verse 10. He talked about in 1:10, he says, I was in the spirit on the Lord's day and I heard a voice that was behind me. And that means there was no natural realm. He was just in the spirit. And then in Revelation 4 and verse 2, it says, I was in the spirit and I saw a door opened in the heaven and I heard a voice saying, come up here. So again, he was totally, the natural world wasn't there. So initially I could see both realms at once. And then when that curtain of light just enveloped us, then it was just the Lord and I was in the spirit fully. So with that, no other distraction, the love coming out his eyes was just so strong. It was so tangible. It was so totally consuming. It was really my first lesson in grace, that grace has nothing to do with the receiver of the grace. Grace is always in the heart of the one who gives it. And because of that, there was such thoughts of my own failings, my sins, my frailties, my imperfections. At that point in my life, I was married, 3 kids. I still am married, 3 kids, but I'm saying they were younger. My imperfections as a father, my imperfections as a husband, sins and missteps and everything else. All that did not matter at all. It was just enveloped in that love. And as I looked into his eyes, and again, we're at this point, we're maybe 10 feet from each other at this point, because I've moved further closer to him. And suddenly I am pulled into his eyes, and I don't know how to describe it other than standing there connected by this liquid love. And then I'm pulled directly into his mind and into his mind. And suddenly I was flying through space. I was in the mind of the Lord and I was flying through space. Somehow intuitively from within me, I was curious and I remember looking to my top left, and there really wasn't a top bottom, left, right, except as my body was oriented. So, I was looking at my top left and my eyes were as good as I needed them to be. No matter how I focused, I saw more stars behind more stars behind more stars behind more stars, all the way through. And I was looking somehow for someplace where his presence did not exist. And instead I saw this, I heard this. It was like a rolling wave, except it was like shimmering, shimmering heat on a hot road surface or something, how it kind of shimmers. It was like a shimmering wave that was coming back to me. And it was his voice saying, I am here. And it was rolling on. It was deep and thundering. And I remember looking opposite. I remember looking down into my lower right. as far as my eye could see, and it just star upon star upon star, just furthest reaches, just far, far away. And again, a rolling wave of sound, like a shimmering light. It was coming, was rolling. And he said, I am here. And I just suddenly was standing right back in front of him. And I said, oh, Lord, you are the creator. You are worthy to be worshiped. You are worthy to be glorified and honored. All praise to you, Lord. You are the creator. You are worthy to be worshiped. And that was just my honest exclamation at having done that. And just suddenly I'm standing before him again. And then I looked at him and I said, I'm a product of your imagination. You thought me up, didn't you? And he looked at me and said, that's right, I did. And I said, that means you spent the same amount of time on everybody who has ever lived or ever will live as you spent on me, right? And he said, that's right. And I said, that's part of what you were doing before Genesis ever opens up, because you were the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. You told Jeremiah before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you and called you as a prophet. I said, you were thinking us all up before creation ever happened. He said, that's right.